everyone. My name is Padmini Nidumolu, and I'm the co founder of Lean and Agile for Women, founded on the premise to bring women from across the world working in lean and agile spaces. And the inspiration for this organization is for women to support each other, to come together, to offer to each other, and seek from each other in a psychologically safe space. And this initiative was launched in 2018, and we were able to impact and touch several, groups of women across the world till date. And as part of this foundation or this organization, we launched an initiative called LIA100 or Lean and Agile 100. And the basic concept is to bring 100 women and their stories with their challenges, how they not just survived, but thrived despite those challenges. And our intent and hope is that anybody out there drawing inspiration from these incredible women, even if one woman out there is inspired and motivated, our effort is well worth it. So, today, as part of this initiative, our guest today is none other than Marsha Acker. I've known Marsha for over 3, 4 years now.
Yeah.
And I was trained by Marsha in facilitation and coaching myself. And I can vouch for her expertise in just the agile field. She's phenomenal, as you will see now in her own words. So it's my true pleasure to welcome you, Marsha, so you can share your thoughts and your story with us.
Thanks, Padmini. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And to interview Marsha, we have Padma Putrevu, who is part of Lean and Agile. She's our global spiral catalyst. She is instrumental in launching global spirals. And she's a speaker, she's a team coach, and she is extremely energetic, very enthusiastic, and she has been making her mark in the agile world phenomenally well over the past few years. So I invite you, Padma, to please carry this story forward with Marcia. Over to you, Padma.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Padmini and Marsha. I am very glad to be here and share this space with two wonderful women whom I also consider role models. And Padmini, I share your feelings about how you vouch for Marsha because you've been trained by her both in facilitation and coaching, and I have been equally fortunate. And for me, the biggest thing that I could say is the transfer of learning, because the facilitation training happened almost 3 years ago or 2 years ago. But I just feel like it was yesterday, and the transfer of learning has had a big impact for me. So thank you, Marsha. And to do justice to Marsha, I do want to give the audience her bio so that they understand more about her and get to know her better. So Marsha coaches leaders and teams, particularly those seeking to have a creative, clear, and powerful impact in their work and their lives. And she's an experienced leader, an entrepreneur in a fast-paced technology and service organization. Her experience spans in all these organizations. She's passionate about helping leaders and organizations achieve results through powerful collaboration and inspiration over a more traditional and command and control style. She has founded Team Catapult in 2005 and has successfully coached leaders and teams in defining and leading change in their organization. And before that, Marsha was an executive consultant at Canal Bridge Consulting, a coaching and facilitation firm focused on large scale organizational change and business process reengineering. As the director of operations for the technology firm Olympus Group Incorporated, she oversaw all client facing work and implemented an organization wide management discipline that increased project profitability and improved program success rates. Why am I not surprised? Marsha has over 20 years of experience in leadership and team development, group facilitation, organizational change, and strategic planning. Marsha's specialty is working with technical leaders and their teams. With her energetic presence and her deep sense of connection, she leverages the power of collaboration as she challenges her clients to define and achieve their next level. Welcome to LIA100, Marsha. We are so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Padma. It is lovely to be here. And I just want to thank both of you for inviting me. It's great. I feel honored.
We are equally honored. So let's start with, what brought you into the agile way of working. If you can start with a brief background of what was your first step into that journey and how has it evolved over time?
Yeah, so I came to Agile somewhat before we were calling it Agile. It was back in the late 1990s, I guess, probably 99, 2000. I was working at a small .com company and was responsible for a lot of our projects that we were doing. And I was known for implementing process. That was one of the things that I really appreciated. And I wanted things like organized and neat process and processes around project management and how we did scheduling. And we were challenged at that time, as many .coms were. It was all hands on deck, long hours, really working to get products out the door. And at that time, we were really working on how do we improve our profitability and our efficiency and effectiveness in delivering those products. So I worked with a fabulous group of technologists at that organization. And one of them had read a book by Kent Beck called Extreme Programming and came in one day and said, hey, like let's try this. And I had a background at that time in process and in facilitation. So I had been at that time for about 7 years doing facilitation. And so I saw the index cards and thinking about user stories and putting things on a table and sorting it out and having a conversation. I saw it as a facilitation technique. And I thought, oh, this is fascinating. Like finally, developers want to participate in a collaborative process and, we can move things around. So then I started to realize it was way more than that. And the index, at that time we were using index cards on tables and user stories. And I kept thinking, oh, well, when are the cards going to get into the tool? Because then once they get into the tool, we can manage them and put them in a project schedule. And they're like, no, that's not how this works. And that was, I think at the moment where I was like, well, then no. What happens to all the cards when the cleaning people turn them over at the end of the night? And they're like, just trust us. So I spent about a year actually somewhat teetering on, I don't like this. I think it's not, there's not enough process, not enough control. And in my mind at the time, control meant increased efficiency, more effectiveness. We could plan more, we'd know what we were doing. And then also wanting the collaborative side of it. So about a year of me fighting and battling that. And finally, I think a lot of light bulbs went on for me. And I thought, oh, this is like, there's a lot here. That was really my first, I think that year and a half that I spent understanding that a bit more. It's like, there's way more here. And I was quite inspired by, I think, more of the values that sit underneath of it, where I started to see opportunities of how agile and agility and those practices could really connect, actually bridge IT to some of the principles that organization development talks about around people and change and the human side of work that I felt like it was hard to have that conversation with technology people at that time, and sometimes still is today. But that was how I came to agility. And it became the foundation for why I actually left that job and became much more oriented into the change side of things. So.
Wow. Wow. So you're a known leader in the Agile community and have participated in tons of community events and workshops.
Mm,
So why is it important for all women Agilists to be involved in the Agile community?
mm. Well, I think, traditionally, and even in technology fields in general, we it's certainly underrepresented. I mean, I remember going off to college, and my degree was in management science with a concentration in decision support systems. And I walked into a large auditorium of people in that degree field, and you could probably have put the women in one small corner of the room. The rest were men. And I have to tell you, like, I think I noticed that, but I have not been one to ever let that get in my way. So I didn't look at that and go, well, this isn't my place. I thought, well, fine. We'll just get started here. So I think in the space of agility, I wish we weren't having those conversations today. I think there are moments in my career where I've thought, gosh, this can't still be the conversation we're having. Not to date myself, but that the time that I walked into the auditorium for the computer science class was many years ago. And I think sometimes I have the feeling like I wish we weren't still having this conversation. Like, aren't we past this, or haven't we gotten beyond that? And unfortunately, we're not. I think the reality is that we still are. And I do think that we've made progress. So I love, even with organizations like Lean and Agile, the fact that organizations like this exist, that they're making an impact and a difference in the world, I think is really important. So I think it's great to have organizations and places to gather where we're raising awareness. I think that awareness is the place where change starts. So I think there's a lot of good that can come from women in Agile really stepping into their own leadership to step out, to be part of the conversation, to be involved in community, to be leading, to be speaking, to have an active voice in that. So.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you. It is important for women to have an active voice to
Mm,
make that change more impactful and sustainable so that,
yeah,
maybe a couple of years later, we are not having these conversations in reality. It's a
yeah,
thing of the past.
yeah.
So you launched Team Catapult and have been successfully, training people. You've trained thousands of people, and now you continue to train people in agile ways of working. At the onset of starting this
Mm.
company, did you have any apprehensions or any kind of self-doubt, and if yes, how did you overcome it? Several
Yeah.
women have this urge to move out of their comfort zone, but
Mm,
they struggle with it. So with negative self-talk or barriers, so how did you
mm.
overcome uh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually it's been a while since I told that story, but when I started, the impetus was being in a company where the values of the company didn't match my own, and so I think I always knew. So if you'd asked me even after I left college, I wanted to own my own company. I just didn't know quite what I wanted to do. And what would the company do? So I spent some time figuring that out. I worked in a really large company and a small company, and felt like I spent some time gaining experience. I did the small and the large company because I wanted to know, what does it look like on both ends of it. I think working in the small company really gave me insight into, like all those things that I took for granted in a large company, like in a small company, they become much more transparent. But sort of the impetus to launch was just being really uncomfortable and unhappy with what was going on, a real value mismatch for me between what I wanted to do with clients and then what some of the choices were the company was making. So that became the launching point, was build a better mousetrap. And I think was it scary? Abso-freaking-lutely. Like any sort of negative chatter that I had in my head all came out. And to some degree, I don't think I knew what I didn't know. So that's probably good in some ways. If I had sat down to like try to map out the plan or figure it all out, I don't think you can figure that stuff out. I think it's figure outable, but I don't think you can sit down and say, you know, much like we talk about in Agile, there's so much uncertainty and unknown. I think some of it is just getting started and then figuring it out as you go along. But I often use the metaphor of it was like jumping off of a cliff for me, and turning around and not sure if the parachute would open on the back. You know, it's going from having the stability of a job and a recurring paycheck and insurance was taken care of to needing to provide all that on my own. We're a 2-income household. We always have been. So it wasn't, I have to give my husband a lot of credit though. He has always been a supporter. So regardless of what I want it to do, he is always like, is it important to you? Then do it. And those are often the conversations that we have at home. And so I regularly appreciate and thank him for that. And I don't know that I quite realized that until I got a little bit out ahead of it and could look back. But yeah, it was like jumping off of a cliff. It's scary.
Wow. If it's important to you, then do it. That's
Mm,
that's very powerful right there.
yeah.
So yeah, I guess we'll have to for women who are trying to go out of their comfort zone,
Mm,
they'll have to give this a good thought about, okay, how important is this,
yeah.
and then
And I
make
think
the
it's
leap.
great to have, you know, whoever it is around you, but it's great to find support structures. I have my own coach now. Through running my own business, my husband and I did reach a point where he was like, I can't be your sounding board anymore. So that was the time when I got my own coach. And but I think whatever you do, whether it's a friend that acts as a coach, or you have a coach, or you have family, or you have siblings, or a spouse, or significant others that can provide some support, I think it's invaluable to have people around you who are like, well, what do you really want? What is, you know, if you got to create it 100%, not 50% or not 70%, but if you got to create what you really wanted, what would it be?
Wow, thank you so much.
Yeah. And
So
also, if I
over
can
the
just add one more thing, Padma, here,
Sure.
just like you pull that nugget, right? If it's important to you, just do it. Another thing, I love the metaphor that you use, Marsha, which is you jumped off the cliff, right? And you didn't look back if the parachute opened or not, but it opened,
Mm,
right? It
yep.
did open and you did land safely, right? You know, at least at the first iterative approach. So I think trusting that the parachute will open, right? You know, your support structures, your own ability, your own, ways of working. I think that's the parachute we should rely on, we should trust on and
Mm,
jump.
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
I can't underemphasize that. Of all the things that I have learned in my career, it has been um, to just, you know, decide what you really want and take action,
Yeah.
and tune out the voices, either yours or others. I think there'll be plenty of people along the way that'll tell you can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they're not
Very true.
helpful, so just turn down the volume. Thanks.
Tune out the voices. That's another thing that I'm taking away today, and it's going to stick with me for a very long time. So, over the years, I mean, since you've also worked with coaching so many organizations,
Mm.
what trends have you observed in organizations that you worked with or with fellow agilists that you worked with? What trends have you kind of observed and it's made an impact?
Mm. I gosh, that's a big question. You know, I think one of like I think about specific organizations, and there are some that I've worked with for a while, but I think it's different in every place. You know, if I think about some of those specific organizations, I have watched organizations, at least in the space that we work, which is in the space of helping people. So I view facilitation and coaching, which are two of our primary courses, I view them as leadership competencies. And I think as we've had the opportunity and the fortune of working with some of those organizations, I've watched them really embrace what it can look like when they take on the process of training their leaders and their managers and the skills of facilitation and coaching. They're a bit more, they're competencies that we don't, I think, traditionally think about as leadership. We tend to have, I think in American business culture, we tend to have this perspective that leadership looks like I'm the one pointing, or I'm the one saying how it's going to be, or setting direction, or making moves. And while that's true, I think that's part of leadership. I think that's only at one end of the continuum. And I think at another end is supporting others and leading from behind, and helping grow self-organizing teams, empowering individuals to take action where they can, decisions at the lowest possible level. So the way I think about it is, it's not an either or conversation, but it's definitely a both and growing, being able to grow range in your leadership is one of the most important ways that I think. You think about what we've navigated this year. Nobody could have ever predicted anything that's happened this year. And we still don't know. It sort of unfolds week by week, day by day. It's a lot of sensing and responding to what's happening, what now, how do we make decisions now based on the data that we have. And if anything this year has taught us, I think, is to sort of be in that space of be present, work with the data that you have, and bring that range of leadership. So sometimes it's about pointing and setting direction. Sometimes you don't know. How can you bring other voices into that process? How can you collaborate with others around you? Where can you tap into that collective intelligence that sits around you? So I've watched organizations, you ask about trends, I've watched organizations who have embraced that and taken it on, and I've watched the impact it can have in their culture, to go from organizations that are really more taking that traditional, style of leadership to being more expansive. If you walk down, back when we were in buildings, if you would walk down the hall, you'd walk past conference rooms where everybody was up and moving around and participating in a really collaborative way in making decisions about projects. And I think that's cool. It's more engaging. It's that's fun to go to work and be part of that. So, and then I've watched organizations struggle with it. So it's definitely not, it's a journey for everybody, and it's not something that every organization finds that they can fully embrace in their culture. So I see but I do see trends moving towards people being more open to the conversation.
Thank you, Marsha. I wanted to move into, how do you see, since you are also very prominent in conferences, and and mainly the Business Agility Conference, where you're an enabler and you're a contributor to a myriad of conferences that happen across the world, for that matter. And now with everything is boundaryless because everything is virtual, so it is, it is across the world, in its truest sense. So do you see women reaching out to speak and volunteer at par with men?
Ask the question again.
So, in all these conferences, do you see women reaching out to speak or volunteer at par with men?
Yeah, well, I think the Agile space pays more attention to it than other spaces, which is lovely. And I think that's because of the collective conversation that we're having in that space. I think as a movement, I do think that we're paying more attention to diversity, kind of in all ways. And that's enheartening. So if I look at Agile conferences, what I see is I do see women stepping forward. I also see women being asked to step forward more, and people at least having awareness and paying attention to those things. I think outside the Agile space, it feels a little bit different, depending on sort of what body or space you look at. but I think in the Agile space, it's my perception. I could be wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. But I do see women being more engaged. I do see women stepping up more.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
What is the message you would like to share with the community
Mm.
and, with Agilists?
You know, as I was telling you the story about sort of how I came to do what I'm doing right now, I'm reminded of a time. So I was at one point promoted to be a director across projects in a company that I was working for. And not long after that, I received some feedback from my boss at the time that said, I think you're doing okay, but you're really lacking the gravitas that we need in a leader. And I found that interesting. Actually, I thought about that. As a matter of fact, the fact that I can tell you about it so many years later tells you that it definitely left an impression. And that impacted me for a while because I went around with a story that I'm not leaderful or I'm not cut out for leadership. What I can tell you now that I couldn't necessarily have told you then is that was much more about that individual and the model that he held for what leadership looked like. Now, I will tell you about 2 months later, he came to me and took it back. And he said I was wrong. He said, I think you have a different style and it has not made you any less effective. So like a lot of kudos to him for doing that. Not everybody would, but it didn't take away the learning for me, which is I think that it goes to what I believe now about how we hold and think about leadership. And that could be leadership of a very small team that you're working with, leadership in a community. I think we need people to step forward and take on leadership roles. And I think some of the work to do is about defining what leadership looks like for you. So my style of leadership will be different than yours, Padma, and will be different than Padmini's. It will have its own characteristics, and it will not be any less leaderful. So the more we can have various versions of leadership, I think the more it becomes normalized that leadership doesn't have any one particular, it's not a pattern. It's a way of being. And I think it's how you show up. It's the intention that you set when you step in front of a room, when you open up a Zoom room and you're going to have a one-on-one conversation. I think a lot of it has to do with intentionality and like what's needed of me in this moment. How can I flex my range? How can I bring different things when it's what's called for in the moment? How can I be more adaptable to the environment, the culture, what's happening in the moment, more adaptable and no less effective. So I think leadership has lots of different looks and feels. And so if you've ever, I think the message that I would share with people is that if you've ever had somebody tell you you're not leaderful, that's way more about them than you. And then it's also commenting on difference. When we see difference in people, when we see them doing something that we don't do, it stands out. It's more prominent. And so I think there's lessons to learn in that. So think about, what's the feedback that you're being given and what would you make of it or what would you do with it? But like get your voice out there, step forward, and step up. I think that's how you grow leadership. I think that's how you develop it is by taking action and then creating space for feedback. So learning, reflecting on your own, what would I have done differently? What could I do differently? But let's get involved.
Wow.
Really love that. Yeah.
Yeah, this it's like step up
Yeah.
and get involved.
Yeah.
Those are like, and then if it's important, do it.
Mm.
Yeah,
I just love
what
those.
really stood out for me also, to add to what you said, Padma, is the message that you highlighted regarding leadership,
Mm.
right? I think it's human to judge
Yeah.
someone who is not like you,
Yep.
same as you, it stands out, as you said, very
Yeah.
organically, right? It stands out.
Yeah.
Now, instead of saying, you're different in a different way, we tend to say it is not good, or it is not optimal, or it's not, enough.
Yeah.
Some people realize and recognize that. And I think this person came back to you and then mentioned that, which is good.
Yeah.
That person at least acknowledged that it's
Yeah.
different, but most people don't, unfortunately. So I think it's important for us to still believe that it's a
Mm.
different kind of leadership, a different style of leadership, and be assertive about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's fantastic. So it's been such a lovely conversation, isn't it, Padma?
I cannot say enough about how wonderful and so many nuggets that I'm carrying away with me
Mm.
today, which is they're etched in my brain now.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And with each woman we are interviewing and bringing the story of Marsha, we hope to kind of leave that footprint on the
Mm.
community, and anybody can take anything away, and who knows whose career in life will be transformed with what you say.
Yeah.
So thank you so very much for your time today,
Mm.
and
You're
all
welcome.
the
Thank you.
insights and all the messages you have given us. And we hope to collaborate, in future. And of course, we'll keep seeing you in conferences and everywhere. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being who you are, and your contributions to our community.
Awesome. Thanks, Padmini. Thanks, Padma.
Thank you so much,
Really.
Marsha.
You're welcome.
And Padma, thank you so much for doing this interview. I think you have done an excellent job. You were a very graceful facilitator today.
Thank you. Thank you. Coming from my role models, this is wonderful.
All right, ladies, thank you so much.
All
Thank
right.
you.
See you all
Thanks.
Bye.
soon.